Today on the show, a good friend of mine, Mr Kostas Kefalakis. Kostas recorded one of the most popular shows we've ever had back in episode 26, a long time ago. Today, we're talking about Kostas' latest journey with Roche, which is an amazing one, of truly engaging everyone, creating full agility. It's going to be a great listen for you. If you want to gain more information on this topic, you can go to the Enterprise Excellence Podcast resources and get hold of the Agile Overview document. That'll give you some more insights into this space that Kostas is talking about. Let's get to the show.
Welcome to the Enterprise Excellence Podcast, where we aim to help create a better future. Learn from our world's experts how to improve and create enduring, high-performance, low-impact enterprises. Learn how to enhance morale, customer and purpose centricity, focus, and calmness. Learn how to create and sustain a culture of excellence at all levels of your organisation.
And I'm your host, Brad Jevons, coming to you from Brisbane, Australia. We are proudly brought to you in association with SA Partners, a world-leading business transformation consultancy. SA Partners are a truly purposeful company focused on helping organisations achieve sustainable improvement for themselves, others, and the planet. Welcome to episode 167 of the Enterprise Excellence Podcast. It is such a pleasure to have Mr Kostas Kefalakis back on the show with us today. Kostas has been on the show with us previously, back in episode 26, one of the most popular ever. Kostas is a transformation leader working with many major companies on excellence transformations over the last 20 years. He's currently a Chief Transformation Officer at Roche Pharmaceutical. Today, we're going to be discussing transforming culture rapidly towards enterprise excellence. Let's get into the episode. Kostas, thanks for coming back again, mate. Really appreciate it.
Oh, it's an honor. Thank you so much for bringing me back.
Oh, yeah. Mate, the big question on the topic we're talking about is, why is it important for organizations to consider transforming towards some form of enterprise excellence right now?
Yeah. I think more than ever now, it's becoming more and more evident that the world we live in is completely VUCA, as they say, right? So it's volatile, uncertain, it's complex, it's ambiguous. So if you're not set up to be anti-fragile in a way, that you're moving fast so you can basically adapt to any given situation, the chances are, your chance of survival long-term will, diminish very quickly, let's say. So I think it's important that every organization is set up for quick adaptations to all the things that are happening on a global scale and be able to thrive from it. And culture plays a big role here because effectively it's not about strategy only. It's really, really important that you have not only the right setup organizationally, but you also have the right people that think in the right way in order to be able to move the organization in the right direction. And no strategy will be correct at this point. I mean, all our forecasts are off, all our predictions are. So the only way to go around this is to be super agile and super quick. And to achieve that, you need a different way of thinking and different people to do that.
Yeah, so I can hear in that, mate, that, there is a lot of uncertainty coming up and what is playing out. Like some of the metrics are pretty crazy that you see bandied around the world at the moment with like levels of debt and consumer confidence and things like that. But then I think I like the comment you made, mate, that there's massive upside. I guess even if things keep cruising on, there's just upside and transforming. But the piece you mentioned too then on agility, because I guess we're used to these long planning cycles and long execution cycles, but really in today's world, it's about pace and speed, you're saying, mate, but I guess you got to do that in a smart way.
Yeah, I mean, agility is like it's a new trend, we can say. A lot of companies say, oh yeah, we're agile, and then nothing really changes. Project managers are now product owners, and whatever, the team is a team, and they do the same thing they used to do. They just pretend, and they do the ceremonies just pretending, or they see it very dogmatically like tools. And I think that's the wrong approach. I think that they haven't really embraced the mindset and the behavior around what it really means. And as a consequence, we're just fooling ourselves, right? So, you have all these people, preaching about agile, but then nobody's really living it. And and then everybody gets, unfortunately, they see it a little bit cynically, let's say, like, okay, this will never work. So that's one aspect. The other aspect is effectively, as you clearly said, right? So no matter what we do right now, we don't really know what's going to happen tomorrow or let's say in 3 months' time. So we need to completely think outside the box. And there's great opportunity in that, right? In the past, what would you do? You would say, oh, the market's downturning, let's fire X amount of people. And then it goes up again, okay, let's hire again. And this doesn't cause psychological safety, you lose talent, you lose knowledge. It takes too much time to ramp back up. And what you really want is an organization that really moves quickly. And I think rapidly and like speed is like of the essence, as you clearly said. And you see organizations that are trying to, how do I say this? There are organizations that are more oriented towards, we've done this for so long, this is what we know, will not change. Or we have to go through all the bureaucratical structures and all the approvals and and by that time it's too late, right? So how much time do we want to spend in our lives making PowerPoints, for the sake of making PowerPoints? And and I remember times where it's like, okay, we have to prepare for this meeting. It takes us 2 months to prepare, 100 slides, and at the end, the information is outdated. It's like we have to find a better way to be able to put the decision-making power to the level where you have the most information or the most knowledge, and allow the freedom to experiment and to do things. What I realized is you present, and then it's like, everybody puts their opinion. And at the end of the day, I'm just thinking, nobody knows. Nobody in this room knows. The only way to find out is to test. And the only way to test is to go out and experiment. Small, and then it sounds very logical from an agile perspective that you say, okay, I'm going to make an MVP, and then I'm going to go test it, then I'm going to make a prototype, whatever. But still today in many organizations, you have this idea of like a steering board that gives you like approval, and you have to present and you have to convince these people. And at the end of the day, nobody knows. Let's not fool ourselves, nobody knows. So the only way to test is go out and really try it out. And that's the best source of information. The way it turned out in software very nicely is because software you can rapidly change, right? And you can always put an update, and you can learn from that. And that's why it caught on so quickly, because back in the 90s, they were trying to make these behemoths of software and never really caught on, and they spent so much money. But we seem not to learn from that, because actually you can apply the same thinking in everything else we do, whether it be sales or whether it be hardware development or whether it be whatever. It doesn't really matter. You can really apply similar logic into figuring out how to test very quickly. So if you have this idea that I don't know, nobody knows, let's go out and try. Or I have multiple ideas, which one should I choose? Don't choose. Go out with all of them. Go out with an MVP thought or like a one pager of what your thoughts, and just go out and just test the waters, because that's the only way to understand if this thing is going to work.
Because there's two parts I want to unpack there with you, mate, because I wanted to delve in this question of you of why is culture important, and you've already raised it. And it's why I was looking forward to chatting to you so much, because you're in the world of Agile now, but after being in that world of Lean, where you and I were focused so much on the cultural aspect of it, to make it stick. Mate, with culture, why is it so important for organizations to actually sink into that with agile transformations rather than just going down the pure, let's roll out Scrum, let's train Scrum Masters, product owners, and roll out systems of Scrum? Why is it important to really sink in and think about that cultural aspect of creating autonomy at the front line and getting a real experimental type mindset and culture going at the front line, or where we can be the fastest?
Look, whether we call it lean, agile, or whatever the new trendy word is going to come out, it really doesn't matter. It's all, as you said clearly, it's all about enterprise excellence, and it's how do we take our way of thinking and working to the next level. And I still believe very firmly in this idea of it's like a bridge that comes together from both sides, right? So you have systems and tools on one side, and you have the mindset and behavior on the other. And neither actually survives alone, because you sort of build the bridge and you're like, but it's not going to reach the other side. Yeah, it's never going to reach the other side. And I've seen too many times companies go with the easy way. And unfortunately, the easy way is tools and systems, because it's more straightforward. It's much more easy to say, okay, we're going to roll out this. We have a training plan, whatever, an upskilling strategy. We have organizational structure. Let's go, boom. But you will reach a point where, and this has happened to me multiple occasions, where people will say, wow, this thing will never work. Yeah, why will it never work? Because actually the person that came and tried to apply it made it so dogmatic, you have to have this, it looks like this, and then people don't understand the why, They don't understand why they're doing it. They don't understand how to adapt to it. So nothing's really changed. We're just sprinkling a little bit, terminology, scrum mastering, and all we all like that stuff. I don't care what it's called. Call it whatever you want. I honestly just rewrite the book. Don't even tell people it's agile. If you the easiest way to bring it is completely hide it under something else. The worst way I've seen is try to take fancy words that don't have meaning in your language and then try to bring them in. We're gonna do pokeyoke and jidoka and andon, and then and then people are like, why are you bringing me all these Japanese words? So you need to sort of make it easy and comprehensible and digestible for everybody. But more importantly, what I find is the mindset and behavior piece, because if you don't have that piece, nothing really changes actually. But that's the hardest part. The soft things are the hardest things, right? So how do you make those things really stick? Because there is no clear playbook. There's a lot of change management books out there. There's a fantastic one called Influencer, The New Science of Leading Change. I mentioned the last part because if you just Google influencer, you'll find different types of book about Instagram. But really, it really talks about how to drive big change. And it talks about, for example, how to make it on a personal level, like what's in it for me, how to make it on a social level, how to bring, the peer-to-peer sort of collaboration, how to make it on a structural level, which means actually changing the physical environment or systems and tools. But effectively, no matter what you read, you need to go out and try. You need to really go out and try and act more like a coach who listens instead of somebody who comes in and says, this is the way, and you try to force it through. So you need to take people with you. You need to gain the hearts and minds of people. It just doesn't come like that, right? It's important because if you have the behavior, but if you don't have the systems will create themselves through experimentation because you want to develop them in the right direction, right? If you just have the systems or the behavior, then what happens is they will be used in the wrong way. That's the worst part. It's kind of like what they say about strategy and culture. Like culture is strategy for breakfast. So a good culture with a bad strategy, the company will make it work. But a good strategy with a bad culture is doomed for failure. It sounds very, I hear myself speak and I hear myself thinking, oh man, I've seen so many LinkedIn posts that are so cheesy. But really, how do we focus on really helping the people drive the change together? And I say together because, and many times I've seen the occasion, many times we have an idea of a transformation. By the way, that's also a scary word, right? So how do we make a continuous thing? And then we just bring it, and then we expect it to work. It doesn't work like that. You have to really involve the people. You need to co-create things with them. One of the things I did when I first started here was okay, what kind of behaviors do we want to live? Really, I went to every single team and I collected all the input about what are the behaviors we truly want. Actually, it's very similar what you will find on a local level than what you will find from a corporate level. It's very, 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 very similar. But the difference is the fact that you asked them and you gave them the freedom of choice makes them buy into the idea much more than if it was sort of forced upon them, let's say from a corporate perspective. Just the fact that they were listened to and they want to co-create with you, and they're willing to try out new things and experiment. This is what people want. They want to be involved in the process and not just something that comes to them, right? So I think this involvement is really critical, right? And also trying things and also accepting that you will fail. And as a leader, if you stand up in front of everybody and say, look, I tried this and it didn't work, and I'm sorry, we'll try it again. Doesn't matter. We keep on going. It gives everybody also an open door to say, oh, if he's open about failure, then I'm open too. So then it allows this culture of failure to sink in much more quickly, let's say.
Okay. So, Kostas, I'm hearing two really key things there about how do you go about cultural change to create that speed. One is, first of all, involve everyone into talking about behaviors and what behaviors would be ideal around here and really help us move forward towards our whatever that aspiration is. And the other one you mentioned was leadership behavior, actually leading by example and showing, right, it's okay to fail. And I'm going to acknowledge that this is not going to go perfect, and I'm going to share when it's not right, and I'm going to apologize, and we're going to go forward.
Yeah, I mean, look, I come off as if I know everything. The truth is that whatever I say is because I failed too many times in my career, and I'll be super open, right? So I've tried different things. The first time I left Toyota and I went somewhere else, I just applied all the tools, and it's like, why don't they stick? Why do I leave and I come back and everything's back to where it was before? So, in this sort of discovery through a lot of failure in my career, I'm coming back to these sort of things, right? I'm coming back to this idea of, yes, you need to co-create, because I've tried it the other way and it doesn't work. I mean, every time I try to give an answer, I always failed. When every time I asked questions, it always came so close to my answer anyways that it was good enough, right? So it was always like coaching, listening, involving was is an outcome of all the failures that I've tried to do by strategizing and planning and directing, which doesn't work. So even as a leader, the leadership qualities you need also change. Like what we've learned here is like this idea of a strategist or a director and a planner and a controller as a leader. The kind of things you will probably read today if you grab any MBA book, are actually in a lot of ways outdated, because it assumes that you have all the answers, and actually you don't. And it assumes that you guide the organization through control, which you cannot. If you want speed, and if you want people to thrive, and if you want people to think for themselves, you need to let go. And in a lot of ways, for a leader, that is super scary, especially for a leader who's has been super successful. And that's probably the most dangerous point for any company or for any person. If they've been super successful, it's like, why should they change? Why should now you're asking me to change? I've been so successful rising up the ranks for so many years. And at the same time, every single person you speak to in the organization, especially the new generation, will say, but I want to be in an organization where my thoughts are heard. I want to have the freedom of choice. I want to have the freedom to innovate, to try out new things and to fail. They want that so much. And so giving them that opportunity is like, it becomes almost automatically the best place to work. It's like the place where they can actually try out new things and not fear failure. Of course, may have seen something that you can guide them or mentor them or ask them the right questions to make them think in a logical way. At the same time, as a leader, you have to acknowledge that you don't know everything, which is tricky, because it's like, but how can how can I not? So you need to acknowledge that you don't know everything. You need to acknowledge that you have to be humble and actually listen. You have to take on the position of more of a coach. And I found that this is also difficult from a generation perspective as well. Whereas there's a big shift now that's happening in these sort of leadership generations, where it's like, and this may sound generalistic, but there are some, trends, whether we like to admit it or not, between Gen X and millennials. The Gen X more like say, okay, but my position is who I am, right? And that is so once you say you are a VP, but you don't really take decisions, you don't really do, you do take. By the way, you do take some decisions. It's just that you don't take all the decisions. There are some decisions that are specifically for yourself, which have to do a lot with like the financial viability of the company, with the reputation, with there are a lot of strategic decisions that you need to make. But a lot of other decisions you really don't need to make. You need to more like empower and build the capability of the organization to grow. And that is, it's like you're ripping out who they truly are as a person, and you're saying, well, now you have to be more of a coach. And a lot of leaders find it uncomfortable. Whereas the millennials are more like, well, I'm more comfortable in that space because that's not the thing that I hold most close to me. What I hold more close to me is like purpose, values. It has to have meaningful work. And so a leader plays a huge role, because the amount of times I failed because I tried from a mid-level management to drive the change and it doesn't work. It just doesn't work, because the higher level management doesn't really want to change, but they want some improvements to happen. Okay, that's not a transformation. Let's just go and call that continuous improvement, and I bring that and I go away. But if you really want to transform into a different type of company, the only way to happen is from the top. And it sounds very strange when I say this, but change happens from the top, revolution happens from the bottom, and that's the only way it's going to happen, right? So the top leaders need to decide whether they want to embark on this very unknown but very fruitful journey that may in the end really, bring them a different type of organization. And I tell you, it's not about we call it lean, it's not about we call it agile, it's not about this magic pill, because again, many leaders will say, okay, yeah, but I need to have these results. You need to change a lot of things in the company to make this work. For example, if we say behaviors, these are the behaviors we want to live, we need to change our systems to match those behaviors. One example of that is like promotions, for example. If you promote the wrong type of behaviors, that's what you're going to get. If you have some, let's say, like we've as a company moved away from KPIs, but let's say you have KPIs, so you are rewarding certain things, so that's what you will get. So these systems work together. If you want to break that thinking, or like for example, we have like one budget where product owners come together and they decide, and this feels very awkward because product owners decide on the budget for the entire affiliate and not leaders. So somebody comes to me one day and says, for example, but I want to get budget approval from the leadership team on this. And I said, you will come, you will present, and we will, again, not give you the approval because it's not up to us. You have to go back to your peers. And that for them was so strange. It's like, but how does this work? And it's like, we have to coach, we have to explain, we have to help them design the right systems. And of course, every time we do something like this, we see wrong behaviors popping up. We see, and that's the role of the leader, is to continuously coach on the right behaviors. That's the only way I see it, right? So in this budget example, we had the product owners, and of course the first thing you do is you game the system to be able to get the more budget to do the things that are good for you. So, and then as a leader, you have to consider, why are they gaming the system? Because if you assume that they have good intent, they're trying to hit their own targets. Why is it their targets but not the targets of everybody? So then we're thinking, okay, they're fighting because they want to achieve the best for their own area. Okay, how do we then make them accountable and responsible and feeling the ownership for the entire affiliate? So we changed their responsibilities, we changed their accountability, and all of a sudden things started unlocking because they started thinking, oh, if we're talking about what's good for everybody, for the entire affiliate here, then I prefer if we do this, and it makes more sense from an enterprise perspective if actually you take the budget there and I stop this. And so all of a sudden you started seeing different types of behaviors, but we changed the system to get that behavior. So you have to continuously look in Roche, we see the leadership being more of somebody who's a visionary. Doesn't necessarily mean he creates the vision, but co-creates the vision, but always reminds people of the vision. So everything we do has to be related. He's an architect, so he architects the system in a way that it reveals the right behaviors continuously. He's a catalyst, which means that he basically helps the teams overcome problems, but also connects them to other teams to solve problems quicker in a much more networked approach. And he's a coach. So it goes very far away from this idea of control or directing, and much more of this idea of enabling. And that's really the critical word. Even here, we're called enabling leadership team, not executive leadership team. And that small word difference makes a big difference at the end of the day. And again, as I said, you also have to live the part. You have to role model the behaviors. So if you're expecting a culture of failure, and imagine the first person who comes to you and they say, I failed, and then you bash them. And then forget about it. That's the first and the last, it's over. But if you reward it in a positive sense, it's like, what did you learn? And how did you transform that learning to other teams? And how can we all learn from this and say thank you for the courage that it took to stand up here? And before that, I'm, as a leader, the first one who's going to stand up and admit my own, let's say, it's not failure, but let's say learning. And then it becomes much more natural. And again, when somebody says, okay, but how did you, because we made a big cultural transformation here, but how did you do it? I cannot say necessarily A, B, C, D, you go out and it's done. It's not a playbook. It's something that's organic. Like Agile is very organic, It's the same thing here. Like change is very, very organic. And you have to figure out what are the things that are triggering the change. One of the things we learned recently is that a high-performing team comes from effectively two things. One is deep trust. So you have to consider, how do I develop deep trust in the organization, deep trust in the team? A lot of things has to do with like failures. A lot of things has to do with feedback, appreciation, success, celebrating success, team building activities, being authentic, being vulnerable, which is something that we tend not to think about in a corporate space where everybody puts their corporate mask, and pretends everything's perfect and they're superheroes. And I did the same. I have to admit, when I showed up here, my team, in the leadership team, thought I was distant and that I was too perfect because I was not vulnerable enough. So one is deep trust as an entire pillar, and you can think about all the things you need to do around that. And the second thing is high expectations. So, which means like ambition, but also a purpose that has meaning, but also like trying to do certain things differently, and not on everything. Choose the 2-3 focus points you want to have, and think about what is that breakthrough. We've done this for years. We've done this. We've always had a 3%, 4% increase, whatever. How do we now go to 50%? How do we go to 100% up? And that is scary, and we don't know the answers, and that is fine. But a meaningful purpose with deep trust creates high performing teams. And you can take that and expand it to the organization. And then think about how, with these two pillars, to bring it through. If you bring only high expectations with no deep trust, your stress levels will go through the roof. And people will start burning out.
And politics will go through the roof.
Politics will go through the roof, and then people will say, "But this is your new KPI." It's like, no, this is not how it works, guys. It's like you have to make it more humanistic. The whole approach. How do we then take, for example, we have our KPIs. These are our KPIs. But let's try to plan our work around thinking completely more ambition. Let's say we have a team that every year we go into these discussions. I'm company A, okay? This doesn't happen here, but say, okay, I'm at 100%. I finished the year with this amount of sales, whatever, 100, whatever. It doesn't really matter. This performance in your manufacturing doesn't matter. And then next year you do 105%, which is, management will say 107, you'll say 103, you'll land on 105, whatever. It doesn't matter, 5% increase. But what if you said, I want to reach 150%? And if that team lands at 127, is that a loser team? No way. Every year they would have done 5%. They made a 27% increase. This is a successful team by far. So you should celebrate that, because you tried out completely different things. You never achieved that level of performance in any way, shape, or form. So celebrate it. But that's the way to think about it, is like high ambitions and try to do things differently in order to achieve it. And you've never done it before, so don't assume you know. So go out and experiment. So everything starts clicking now.
I love, Kostas, what you're talking about, because you're talking about leadership. Our role alters, where it's very much visionary and aligning back to the vision. And then it sounds to me like that really leadership is experimenting and learning constantly around culture, where you're thinking, what systems, why is certain behaviors happening? What's causing that? And of course, measurement and the way that we measure and the way people get paid drives a lot of behavior, but there's many other systems. And then you mentioned that two key pillars of it is, how do we build intense, deep trust, which hangs back to all of that. And I guess as a leader, we're the architect of working to create that. And then also that aspiration. How do we build the culture of aspiration, where we're willing to go the extra mile and look to really go that further step, but experiment to get there? And I just love that bit you're mentioning about that you won't have all the answers out of the gate, but do you have that curiosity and that constant experimentation as a leader to keep navigating the behaviors that come up and the challenges that come up?
Yeah. Is there a question there? Sorry.
Am I on track with that, mate? Am I on track
Absolutely.
with that?
Absolutely. I mean, that's exactly it. I mean, there are too many good stories around experimentation and trial and error and trying new things that we've never done before. And it just feels more relevant now because of the global situation we're in. Right? If I were to tell you, you need to build a house that you built 50 times before, there's no reason for experimentation unless you have some breakthrough target to do it, like whatever, 50% cheaper or 50% stronger. There's no reason to experiment something different. You know the steps. So just follow your classic waterfall project management, and you're done, right? It plays a big role when you have high levels of uncertainty, and if you want to include high levels of ambition, exponentially becomes more tricky. Um, and of course, we have to rely on, past experiences and whatever we've gone through as well. We all come in with a lot of knowledge. It's just there's a trap there. We need to be careful that we don't know everything, because we may fall into old, thinking that we know everything. But at the same time, for me, it's liberating to think that we don't have all the answers. It's liberating, because you can also have the freedom to experiment. And if you look at, like, I mean, this is gonna sound cheesy, but if you look at startups, I mean, and there are way too many failures there as well. But it's like the thinking that gets you is like, how do we just try and try and try and try? And even more cheesy it'll sound, but if you look at how kids learn, it's really just trying. Like, they don't have the answers. They're not staring board. Should I stand up? No. It's just figure this out, sort of. And they have no fear of failure. Also, it's like, I'm wondering, why is it so ingrained in us as adults that we're so fearful of failure, right? And it's like, look, it's fine. We don't know the answer. We'll just figure it out. And even if we fail, as long as it's like I'm just thinking, how do you minimize the risk? Not risk, but how do you minimize the impact of failure? The best way to do it is just fail sooner and smaller than later and bigger. So, like, don't invest 3 years and like $1 million plus, and then, oh, it's not working. Yeah, because you didn't go back in the beginning and you didn't ask for any. You know what I'm saying? You could have figured it out with like one drawing on a board. You probably could have figured out more information.
Kostas, that's one thing I'm keen to explore a bit more deeper with you there, because I hear of a lot of companies where they go, oh, we're agile and we're doing minimal viable product, and they're just punching product out into the market with a lot of defects, massive amount of defects. So they're actually just burning customers with huge amount of defects or technical debt, whatever you want to call it. What's your advice there? Because I know a lot of your languages have been about these small, fast experiments with, drawings or brochures or very simple stuff. But can you explain that, mate, so that I guess we don't just push more defects into the world?
I think the misconception there is viable. There's a critical word called viable. And I think that's the misconception. For example, if I take an app and I open it, I will tell you, in 30 seconds, I will decide whether I'm going to delete it or not. Actually, most apps are deleted within the first 24 hours of like downloading them. And why is that? Because they released an completely unviable product. Not incomplete, unviable. It just doesn't work. It doesn't do anything. Functionality is like less than bare minimum. I think the idea here is like, how do you make decisions? Decisions you make based on information. If you keep that in mind, that decisions are based on information, you're already like halfway there. Because when you want to buy a car, you need a certain set of information in order to make your decision. You need to know the price, the models, the reliability, the color options, whatever. There's a specific set that you're thinking about. You will never get to the point where you're asking for a lot of information, to the point where you say, okay, what is the specific material that the underbody is made out of? At some point, the line gets stopped and you say, I have information to make a decision, and the rest of my unknown, let's say, it's risk. But I am okay with this amount of risk. Okay. So when you try to make a decision on how do you release a product, you need to understand, like, what is the information that I need? Now, the information comes in multiple forms, right? There's information, for example, that has, or knowledge. So you can think about it like knowledge, and then what I don't have is a knowledge gap. So what knowledge do you need? Like, you can cut it even into buckets in terms of like customer requirements, or manufacturability, or material strength, or whatever, technology viability. There's a lot of elements you can break it down to. And then you need to discover and this is where the agile comes in, like, very quickly, is like, how do I get as much information, or how do I close those knowledge gaps as quickly as I can? In the software world, it tends to be releasing quite quickly and then adapting quite quickly. In the hardware world, it's completely different, because you can end up thinking, okay, either A, I'm going to do every time full system creation and then test it, which is super expensive, or B, I'm going to release, as you said, bad quality to market, which is even worse because then you just destroy your brand. The best way for me, what I realized is that you need to really break it down and really test. And that's actually the funny thing, is that we have this lesson from the Wright brothers like 100 plus years ago, and we still haven't learned. That's the funny thing. It's like, how did we develop flight? Samuel L. Langley made full scale models, and he just burned through cash and didn't create a plane. And these guys were like making bikes and in the backyard were flying like kites and closing knowledge gaps, because they broke it down into three pieces. It was about I think it was like power to weight ratio, like how much power do I need to actually lift, to get enough power to. Then the second point was lift, and the other one was controls. So they broke it down, and they really did a lot of experimentation. Now here you can do simulation, you can do subsystem testing, you can do rapid prototyping, you can do a lot of things in order to get the information, and then you go out, and with something very simple, and then it gets more and more and more complex, you test it with a small group of people. You don't go out full scale model immediately. You go and you test first, and you gain enough knowledge to the point where you're saying to yourself, I'm okay with this level of risk, because you will never answer every single question. There will always be knowledge gaps, but at least try to answer the biggest knowledge gaps that you have. The same thing you can say for sales, right? Or the same thing you can say for, there's so much place where knowledge gaps and knowledge comes into play, but that's exactly how everybody makes a decision. Should I go and do this? Okay, what information do you need to have that? And what information could you get in a very quick way? A lot of times we can also do a lot of guesstimation, which is good enough. Just quickly guesstimate some numbers, and you quickly get a feel of the size of the market, or get a feel of where most of the time is lost in manufacturing. There's quick ways to also get information. But that's my take on that. It's like people forget the importance of knowledge and knowledge gaps to make a decision.
Yeah, the
And
knowledge
of course,
gaps.
the result is horrible products.
Yeah, and remember the middle V and minimal viable product. I love that. That's really, really cool. Kostas, we've covered some good ground, mate. And I love the piece on culture you bring in, the focus on behavior, the element of leadership, really going deeply into behavior and understanding it, and then running experiments and improvements around that. And then our discussion on minimal viable product to make that clear. Mate, what would be your enterprise excellence tip to an organization looking to want to build agility and transform more down that space to either flourish, but also navigate tough times if they're to come?
Oh man, that's hard. Honestly, I would say co-create the change with the people. Work to develop deep trust. And it could be very small things as well. Like honestly, one of the things that we did here is that we wanted to bring this culture of appreciation and recognition, which is a key element of trust. And we just made small videos that we show every month to the sort of like all hands meeting, in the company. And you have 5 minutes where people say, I appreciate this person because of they did this. And then the next person. It's like 5 or 6 people in a row. That small video, man, made such a big change in the feel of that meeting. It was unbelievable. I would say, another thing is, like, as a leadership, you need to be very clear as to, what you envision the change for you as leaders and for the organization. Don't expect to have all the answers. Patience is a huge element here. One of the things I was talking about with one of the leaders here was like, his level of patience and knowing that this thing will not go as fast as people think that it will, but showing the patience and the resilience to it. And it's not about change for the sake of change. It's not transformation for the sake of transformation. It's about, for us, it was about bringing more value to patients. So you have to have that purpose. Why are you doing this?
Yeah.
And it has to have a deep purpose as to why you want to embark on such a transformation, let's say. And so patience, leadership, co-creation. The hardest one, I would say, okay, you definitely need to have people that helps you with the change. That's why, for example, I was hired because I have the sort of background that can help really actively, coach the organization, bring new ways of thinking through. There's a part that, which for me, which is the trickiest one, but I would say it's a necessary through my many years of failure, let's say, which is not everybody is going to go along,
Mm.
and that's life. When you try to create an organization that is more of an organism than it is an organization in the classical sense, like a machine, but it moves in this very fluid, very agile way of thinking, people will not like it. Some people will not like it. Some people will say, but I want to be told what to do. Some people will say, this will never work here because A, B, C, D. Some people would like to go back into the world of whatever politics you may have in the past. The unfortunate thing is that, well, the good thing is that there's some company out there that is best suited for these people. It's not this one.
Yeah.
Maybe they will change. Most likely they will not. You need to make, you need to come to terms with it, and you need to separate your journey with these people. Unfortunately, I always say in any change, you have four types of people. You have those that are willing to drive the change with you. They're super excited. They don't know either, but they're excited about the prospect of what could be. You have the tourists that are like, yeah, I'll get on the bus, I'll take the pictures. I'm not gonna drive, but I'm willing to go along the journey with you, and you take me around, and I will try this thing, even though I will not drive it with you. There's the prisoners that will say, I don't know why I'm here. My boss sent me here to do a training, blah blah blah, whatever. I don't know. They don't even know why they're doing this. And there's those that are actively working against you to pull it back. And unfortunately, the good thing is that you only have enough energy to spend on the drivers and the leaders on the change, right? And they're the ones that are going to create excitement. The last, I call them assassins, but whatever. The last group need to make a decision, stay or leave. And if they don't make a decision, you as a leader need to make that hard decision.
Yeah.
And they may be the people, and again, this comes to the place where you say, is the intent good or not? If the intent is good, but they're challenging from a perspective of understanding, it's okay. But if the intent is bad, even if they bring the best results for the company, which is the hardest decision to make, you need to do this, because otherwise it's not going to move. Unfortunately not. So there's a lot of aspects to it, but I think that development of the deep trust also comes from this. Once you take such decisions, you show that you're creating a deep trust with the people, that you don't want toxic behaviors. You really want to develop a new culture, and you really want to take this, moving forward. Patience is key, and also the patience to try and fail at all levels of the organization, and also be humble that you don't know and you will fail as well. Yeah, that's sort of like too many tips there, but
yeah, no, I understand too, mate.
as well. That's why there's so many failures that I have so many stories to tell.
Well, it's the knowledge and wisdom, mate, that you and the team at Roche are being able to bring forward, and I can really sense that humility of you are experimenting, you're navigating, but the powerful thing is you're focused on behaviors, and you're really looking at what do we need to do to keep altering that path and get that out, that vision that you're all aligned to. It's great, mate. Now, Kostas, I know you're constantly having insights, mate. You're a constant learner and a constant progressive person in this regard. But what's been the most recent insight for you, mate, where you thought, wow, okay, that's interesting?
I think as I mentioned earlier, like one of the big ones is that, look, if we look at the progress of a team in that classical, forming, storming, norming, performing, and I take the teams through this process as well. And it's funny because you hear some teams and they're like, yeah, we're in the forming, but I don't think we're going to storm. I'm like, yeah, I'll see you in 5 months. It's 100%. Unfortunately, it's true. It's like, how fast are you going to go through the storm? We as an affiliate over the last 3 years, and by the way, the positive things with the whole transformation that happened in Roche is that it came from a central position, but they had done it with a co-creation with 2,000 people on a global level. So it was really inclusive. So we really bought into it, and it was really clear that this was like not a, how do I say it? It's gonna sound strange, but it was like not really an option. We had to go through this, but we could always shift the ingredients a little bit on a local level. But the good thing is that it was directionally correct. So it was not like me as Kostas, I'm coming and making the change. The good thing is that over the last few years, we've gone through that curve, right? So we went through forming, basically the whole transformation introduction. We went through the whole storming. Everybody's uncertain. They're scared. Different people came in my position in the past that said, okay, we're very dogmatic, tools oriented. And, when I came in, I knew the issue. The first day I came in, people were saying this will never work. So I knew exactly what I was getting myself into. Over the last few years, we've been working through out of the storming phase and into norming with incredible, failures and successes. I like the fact that our employee engagement is through the roof. I love it. I love the fact that we got in some projects that we never imagined that they would actually be successful, making a real difference to patients' lives and improving the healthcare system. What we aspire is to go, how do we shift from norming to performing? And that was where I got stuck mentally, because for so many years I was helping teams just, to really bring it to a certain level. But it's not like I was ever had enough freedom in the past and enough let's say not patience, but enough maturity to say, okay, now we can shoot through the roof, right? We can really do that breakthrough. I tried in the past to introduce things like Hoshin Kanri and all this stuff, which is breakthrough logic, but it failed. And I was always wondering, why did it fail? And I realized that I didn't have the other elements of the puzzle to be ready to do this. Reaching that point of norming to performing, I was always stuck. I was like, I can't understand the difference. And I don't know what performing really looks like in a perfect, like in that sort of like visionary mindset. One of the big insights was this idea of like, you actually go deeper in all the things you've done in the past, and this deep trust and high expectations. And of course, everything will come through that in terms of you've already built a lot of the foundational pieces, right? You've built the behaviors, you've done a lot of the cultural part. But this idea is that now is the right time for us. We have developed the deep trust, and probably there's a sequence there. Deep trust goes first, and then comes the high expectations. And how do we now think completely differently now that we have all the foundational pieces? I think for me it was the biggest aha moment I've had over the last, like, say, 6 months. Because I had already tried a lot of different things in the past. I'm so excited the fact that now we're ready more than ever to really hit that idea of like, okay, how do we now reach whatever 2, 3x, 4x, 10x? How do we really completely go through the roof? And we were definitely not prepared in the past to do this. And it would have definitely frozen and gotten the whole organization scared if we had done it 2 years ago. It would have been like, we're going to be working 10 times more, etc. Right? So they would have immediately taken as fear. So there is a sequence at the end of the day as to how to drive change. It's not like if you mix it up. I always say it's like, how a rocket takes off? You have these different boosts that come into different plays, right? If you mix them up, the rocket will explode. There is a right sequence that takes you from one step to the next step to the next step to the next step, and you cannot mix it up completely. You need to first build the foundational pieces and then build it up. And so for me, this is what I'm most excited for, and I'm excited. And this is like the kind of like aha moment that I've had, is that there is a sequence. You need to build certain things. Things do take time, but when you're ready, you are anxious because you're like, okay, there is something that for me was like, okay, but now I've done all these things, and I felt a sort of sense of like, tingling, like I need to do something. What's next? And it's like, okay, now this feels like the right time. So really excited to see how that's gonna evolve, and maybe in the next podcast I'll tell you all about it.
Yeah, that'd be great, Kostas. Like, I really love that discussion you're mentioning about, a lot of the work you've done is on getting those ideal behaviors and then really exploring the systems and the leadership behaviors that are either helping or not helping. And you've done a lot of work to improve there, and experimentation, I can see with all the team at Roche. And you've now got this foundation of trust where people can push that aspiration further to go, right, how can we experiment and do some really cool stuff to just ratchet it right into that performance phase, because we're culturally in a really great spot. And that's a great insight, mate. Kostas, thank you so much for your knowledge and expertise, mate, and recording a cracking episode with us again like you did previously. Mate, I want to ask you for two things here. I know you've got a big conference coming up in the near future where Jeff Leiker and a few other people are going to be there too. So keen for you to mention that. And also, mate, just how can people reach out to you?
Sure. I mean, my LinkedIn is always open. Just everybody can shoot me a message. I'm always open to spar or give some ideas wherever I can help. I don't have all the answers. I just have a lot of, experience through doing this for quite a long time. But anybody who wants to reach out to me, of course, if you search my name, Kostas Kefalakis, you will find me, and open and happy to chat about anything. And I'll be super honest as well, right? I mean, I don't want to come off as dogmatic in any way, shape, or form. It's more like, how do we really drive a company to a different level? And as I mentioned earlier, right? It's from a leadership perspective, it takes a lot of courage. It takes a lot of, admitting that this will not be an easy thing, and you want to really drive it through. One of the last things that I wanted to share maybe is there's a really interesting. I've done a lot of leadership sort of like assessments, let's call it like that, and I never really liked them. But there's a really, really, really good one called Leadership Circle Profile, which talks about creative behaviors and reactive behaviors. It is fantastic, and I really, invite everybody to go check it out, because basically you can actually drive your whole culture from a perspective of reactive, which is more fear-based and more coming from a space of like reacting to the environment, to much more creative, which is much more about setting directionally, being closer to people, being authentically courageous. And I really love that. And I think that also helps guide the conversation and also guide organizations to the next level. Yeah, really open. Also open to learn a lot of new things. If everybody has something they want to share or some insights, very, very, very glad to talk.
Yeah, well, Kostas, thank you so much, mate. Appreciate your time, knowledge, and support as always. And, mate, appreciate everything you're going to do in the future too. Cheers, mate.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Brad. Thank you for inviting me again.
Cheers, Kostas. Bye for now. What a great episode. Remember, you can go to the Enterprise Excellence Podcast website to get hold of the Agile resource we have up there to gain some more information under resources. There were 3 key takeaways for me from this episode. Firstly, co-create on culture and behaviours. This approach that Kostas was talking about at Roche, where they engaged everyone to explore culture and what behaviours they would see linked to their values and get everyone involved in that conversation, really helps to get buy-in to culture and to create good momentum right from the start. The second key takeaway from me was that leadership sets a vision, and then they've got to be ready to experiment and improve around systems and behaviours to enhance that culture going forward, to move the organisation towards a vision. I really love the discussion Kostas had around the power of measures and how we measure and recognise people, and whether that can drive the ideal behaviours or behaviours that are not so ideal. The third key takeaway for me was foundations first, which is about vision, trust, autonomy in the workforce, starting to get the work team experimenting and learning from customers. And then from that foundation, really looking to ratchet it up to performance, because you've got that foundation of trust, you've got the systems in play and people getting used to it, you've been through that forming, storming, norming, and then you can go to performing with the people's involvement, because they're ready to set those aspirational targets and really start going for it. So cool to hear that Roche and yourself are there, Kostas. Really looking forward to hearing more about the journey going forward. Thanks for sharing your knowledge and helping us create a better future again, mate. Talk soon. Bye for now.